I listening because I'm trying to do the right thing and be a good person? Or am I listening to try and like really be here for this person? Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name's Mickey, I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapist-y things on this channel. Today, we are talking about 5 ways that you can support your anxious friends. We made a video like this recently about depression, and I figured that this would be a useful part 2 to that video. So we're talking about how to support your loved ones who are anxious and or have anxiety. Before we jump into it, I want to be super clear. This channel and all of the content on it is intended to be for educational and sometimes entertainment purposes, but it is not, has not, will never be therapy, a replacement for therapy. However, there are links in the description for you to go find your own therapist if you want one. I don't want to waste too much time, so let's just get into the thing. While I pull up my tips though, if you're new here, hi, thanks for coming. You should subscribe. Go down there and click the button. And while you're down there, you can click the like button too if you like the video. Thanks. Thing number 1, validate their anxieties. This comes with a caveat, however, because we want to validate people's anxieties, not in the, oh yeah, that's definitely going to happen and you should be afraid of it type of way, but in the, I can understand that this feels super real for you, and so I'm not trying to argue with you or invalidate your feelings kind of way. This is kind of a difficult skill to master, and in the beginning, especially if you're new to this, I would encourage you to just, quite honestly, voice this out loud and be like, hey, I super want to validate this, not because I think that this is a thing that is for sure going to happen, but because I hear you and I understand that this feels super real, and so I want to like be here for you and like understand where you're coming from. So I'm open to hearing more about it if you want to talk about it. This is sometimes helpful, like communication stuff, to just go full meta when we don't really know how to say what we're saying. Just say that. But the core here generally is that I want to encourage people to honor that anxieties and fears and phobias are not things that we sometimes, like I would say 50% of the time, we're not actually convinced that they're going to happen, but it does still make us afraid anyways. Oftentimes the person that you're talking to or trying to support who's anxious is well aware that like a meteor is not going to fall out of the sky. We know that the odds of that happening are relatively low. However, we can't just logic our way out of anxiety. That's not how it works, especially when it's an irrational fear. So doing the thing where we tell someone like, oh, well, it's not going to happen. Great, thanks. Like, could someone tell my nervous system? Because that doesn't make me feel better. And so validating that anxiety and like really immersing yourself in this person's world to understand that while it may not be a realistic or a rational fear, it does still feel real. And it's important to have support about that. Tip number 2 is something to not do. Never tell someone, just relax. This is probably the most nonsensical advice, but also the most common advice that people with anxiety receive. Oh, just calm down or don't worry about it. Great, thanks. I'm healed. That doesn't help anyone. I also want to be clear before we move on with the rest of this video. If you are a person who has said these things or does say these things, please know that this is very normal. Don't go down a shame spiral about it. It is okay. We can only do better when we know better, and it's hard to support someone who's struggling with something that we might not understand ourselves. So give yourself permission to have maybe said or done the wrong thing in the past, to learn from that, to grow from that, and to do better moving forward. I think our culture generally does a really fucking bad job of educating people about mental illness and like mental health generally and therapy. That's why I make the content that I make on this channel. And so a lot of times we come into situations or conversations like this without foundational skills that would be helpful. So be kind to yourself, and also stop saying this to people. If it were this simple, I can promise you that someone with chronic anxiety or clinical anxiety would have just gotten over it by now. But unfortunately, it does not work that way. And so telling someone just calm down not only doesn't work, it's ineffective, but it also can feel really isolating and really judgmental too. It can feel like someone is judging you or sort of looking down their nose at you for not being able to control it. And I want to encourage folks to remember that anxiety is something that is very difficult to control, particularly when we are new to discovering that we're a person with anxiety. There's a lot of skill building that has to happen before we get to a place where we can effectively regulate our emotions around it. Thing number 3, take ownership of the energy that you're bringing into the room. What I mean by this is that oftentimes, especially more so this is like in the realm of interpersonal and close interpersonal relationships, oftentimes we can get into a place where maybe we're not taking full ownership of how we are approaching a conversation. This can look like passive aggression, maybe not being fully transparent, or like having a frustration or aggravation with the person we're trying to support and not fully owning that because we don't want it to come across as judgmental. And I want to encourage everyone to remember that Particularly people with anxiety tend to be rather perceptive, especially if their anxiety is social in nature. The person that you're trying to support that you might also be frustrated with might probably will feel if you were frustrated or aggravated or losing your patience. And so taking ownership of that energy and saying like, you know what, I'm feeling a little bit frustrated. So like maybe I need a minute to deal with my own stuff because it's not your fault. It's just that I'm like having an emotional reaction. So I'm going to go take some time to like deal with that or what have you. But I really want to discourage people from trying to hide it, and especially from lying about how you feel, because again, that person probably can feel it and will perceive that that's in the room. But second of all, you not acknowledging that and not bringing it into the room can actually feed into the anxiety and to cause someone to get more locked into this cycle of like, oh, see, everyone in my life hates me. Everyone thinks that I'm a terrible person and no one wants to be with me and no one loves me. And so it can cause like an increase in the anxiety. It is very human and very okay to feel frustrated and to feel overwhelmed with trying to support someone who has anxiety, because it's a difficult thing to deal with ourselves, but also to be a support person around. Particularly if the anxieties are irrational in nature, it can feel sometimes kind of like, why can't you just not be anxious? And I want to humanize this. I want to normalize this. And I want to encourage you to take ownership of that, because that's your reaction. Those are your emotions to regulate and deal with. And it's not fair to like push them onto someone or to project them and make them someone else's responsibility. I can guarantee you that whoever it is that's dealing with the anxiety is also feeling frustrated and overwhelmed by the fact that they cannot just force their nervous system into submission. So having the responsibility of soothing someone else's emotions on top of that feels kind of suffocating and is not fair. So there's work to be done on both sides of that equation interpersonally. And so generally, I want to encourage everyone, I guess, to take responsibility for our own things and to give ourselves the time and space that we need to regulate that, sit with that, validate the shit out of that, and then come back to the table when we're in a more even-keeled place. Okay, tip number 4 is to honor that there might be a whole lot happening behind the curtain that you don't get to see. People who have anxiety tend to suffer with racing thoughts. Like it can feel really overwhelming and like your mind is moving at a mile a minute when you're an anxious person. Again, particularly when it's social anxiety, but this can happen with all different types of stuff. And so when you, as the support person, are trying to be there and trying to support them, it's important to know that whatever the anxious person is choosing to share with you is probably just a fraction of what is actually going on in their brain. And so A, this can sometimes mean that the stuff they're sharing with you might not make sense. B, it can sometimes mean that their affect, what they're presenting to you, might seem incongruent with what they're telling you. And this can feel confusing as a support person. You might not understand why this is happening. That's because, first of all, like I said, there's a lot happening behind the curtain that you might not be privy to. And second of all, it can be difficult to verbalize, like, here are all of the things that my brain is telling me and that's going on inside of my body and are like sort of like consequences of those thoughts, like the sort of rabbit trail that we follow when we're anxious. Verbalizing that, like noticing that it's happening for us, first of all, but then verbalizing it and externalizing it in a way that someone else can understand is like really a lot of work. And so if you're trying to be a supportive person, especially as a parent in this, this comes up a lot. We're like, I don't understand what my kid is saying or why they're saying these things. It's probably because it's difficult for them to voice that to you. And so just know, I would encourage you to practice making peace with the fact that you might not have all of the puzzle pieces most of the time. And it's an important process to learn how to trust the person that you're trying to support who is anxious, that they know what they're saying, that their experiences are super valid, first of all, and that it's okay for you to not fully have all of the puzzle pieces, because you can still be an effective support person for them without knowing every single detail and all of the context and the minutia for what it is that's going on. Tip number 5 is a little bit of an obvious one, but I want to talk about it anyways. Practice active listening. This can be, again, kind of obvious, but something that bears repeating because, again, our culture does a really bad job educating the masses about what it actually means to be an active listener, how to do this, why to do this, and what that actually looks like in real time, especially because we might not have a great understanding of what it looks like or feels like to be an anxious person. And so that active listening piece can sort of get lost in the shuffle because we can get wrapped up in our own confusion. I don't understand why you feel this way. I don't feel this way. And so like, why are you feeling this way? And how come you can't just stop? These are all like us things, right? Like as a support person, that's all about you, which is fine. And again, like very human and morally neutral for you to have those thoughts and questions, but they can very much get in the way of you actively engaging with the listening process and trying to like understand and like really immerse yourself in the world of the person who's anxious. So I would very much encourage you to take stock in the moment of like, what is it that's happening for me? Am I actually listening to understand, or am I listening to respond? Am I listening to fix? Am I listening because I'm trying to do the right thing and be a good person? Or am I listening to try and like really be here for this person? I want to remind everyone who is a support person, for anybody really, but especially for a person with anxiety or mental illness, that the work is not in being perfect. You are not called to be a perfect person and to have all the perfect answers and to help them fix it. The work is really just to be there in the shit and to honor that this is okay. This is human. I love you because of this, regardless of this, and I will be here for you, regardless of how this looks or whether it's a good day or a bad day, and communicating that to your person. So be kind to yourself also if you're a support person. Boundaries are a really important part of supporting a loved one who has mental illness or anxiety, and so don't feel guilty about taking time and space to take care of you and to meet your own needs and to do the things that fill your brain and your heart with joy, but also give yourself permission to show up imperfectly, and sometimes, again, to honestly just say, I don't really know how to do this. I don't really know what I'm doing here, but I'm doing my best. And I do know that I love you and that I care about you and that I've got your back. And so I will probably fuck this up a little bit, but I am choosing to trust that we will work through that together and that we can be imperfect together, and that us having a bond and this closeness is enough to see us through this relationship. If you like the video, I want to make more content like this because I know that y'all have asked for some like more direct educational type of videos, and so let me know if you like this and you want to see more of this. I have a whole bunch of stuff like this that I'm happy to share if y'all want or need it. Also subscribe if you're new to the channel. Thanks for coming, love you the most, and share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow, and I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay.